I had just had my birthday on the 28th of September and I was 84. I was born 1925.
Where were you born?
In South Grafton.
Right.
At that time there were quite a few private hospitals in Grafton and South Grafton. I was born in one of those.
And how did you finish up in Bellingen?
Well, I was a school teacher and I was sent here in 1950 to the infant school. Actually, when I came to Bellingen, I was then teaching the kindergarten class, because I'd started with a one teacher school because a lot of the young men were away at the war at that time. It was 1945, and 43-44 I went through Teachers College. There weren't very many young men there, and they usually sent the men out to the one teacher schools, but because of lack of young men, I was sent to a one teacher school at Whitlam Creek on the Upper Clarence, and after that I went to a two teacher school near Lismore, and then after that I seemed to get into the infants department, and I was teaching first class and kindergarten for the rest of the time. At Tenterfield and Glenray, Woolgoolga, and lastly Bellingen. I spent my first years in a little one teacher school. It was actually on my father's property. They had a 99-year lease, and it was very easy for us to go to school. We were very lucky. There were only about 16 to 20 pupils there, but I had a wonderful teacher called Mr. Chapman. And when I finished sixth class I should say, my mother wanted me to go to St Mary's in Grafton, because I'd already done a year or so with music. Apparently they thought I was quite good because I'd been playing a little bit of ear up until I was 10.
Tell me what attracted you to Bob when you met him.
Oh, the music,
Right,
definitely. But it wasn't only that. I remember.
What did Bob play?
He played the trumpet in the Bright Lights band. There were two very good bands on the North Coast. One was at Lismore, where I was for a time, and there was one at here in Bellingen. They had a very good jazz band here. And it was called? It was called Bright Lights, and Bob played the trumpet. But he learnt the trumpet in the brass band here. The Goodwin family came here and started the brass band. Oh, Mr. Goodwin. Bob was born in 1921. And they were still here. They had a dairy. It was a dairy farm, and he had two sisters, and they were married and living in Bellingen at the time.
How about you, Mary? What children do you have?
I had 5 children. Paul Hector John, I was married in 1950, and Paul Hector John, born 1951. Eleni Wilhelmina, 1952. Twins, Christopher Robert and Judith Mary, born 1955, and Rosalie Catherine, 1956. The library was located in a shop front, just opposite the police station when I first started, and it didn't even have its own toilet. And if I wanted to go to the toilet, I had to shut the library, go round to the CWA. And then, after a while, the council decided to put it upstairs in the Memorial Hall. That wasn't very satisfactory. They acquired the old school. They thought that wasn't very good for mothers and disabled people. I think they were becoming aware of those things, and so then they took the library over to the front room of the old school.
Right,
and
that was now and then in those days as the community centre, right?
Yes, it became the community centre, yes, after that, when with all the trouble they had there, and when they pulled the community centre down, they put the library where it is now, but, no, not where it is now, because we have this wonderful new library. They put the library in the old headmaster's house in a couple of the rooms there. There was no trouble about when it was in the Memorial Hall. It was only they realised it was so very inconvenient for people.
Because of the steps?
Because it was upstairs and there was just one room there, and then they decided to put it over in the old school. But then of course we had all that trouble with the new people coming here, the alternates, and the council wanted to pull down the old building and put up new buildings and all that sort of thing. And I think, Peter, that you'd know what went on at that time between the council and the new people. There was quite a lot of mistrust amongst the local people with these new people coming here with their new ideas, and we started a CYSS, CYSS, and a neighbourhood centre, and they all were very mistrustful about these new things that were coming into the... But I was quite happy with it. But again, another thing, these young people had travelled and they used to object to them sending their little ones into the library with no clothes on and things like that. And so they decided to pull the old school down, and they did. We did try very hard to keep it, but. We even asked the Heritage Council and the National Trust, but we lost. And so then they just shifted the library over into the other house, the other building, which was the headmaster's house. And then afterwards, eventually, when they built the new council there, they also extended the old house and put the library on the eastern side of the old house. And yeah, as it is now, the old house is still there, but it's been extended, and it's got the neighbourhood centre and the senior citizen centre. Because I was in the library and I'd met all these people, both the older generation who were here, or the people who belonged to Bellingen, and the new people who were coming here. It wasn't one of the older generation, or the what would you call them? I can't think what name you'd call them, but it was one of the some of the newer people who wanted me to go into council, because they knew I had a good attitude about things. I was sort of in the middle, and I was very lucky in that when they asked me to nominate for council, I was able to get nomination from both sides of the town, and then I managed to get into council, and I didn't win a lot while I was in council. I didn't have the numbers, but I think a lot of the things that I fought for at the time, they came later. Some of the things that, but we didn't. We lost the old school, and a lot of things have happened in Bellingen at that time that I didn't like. And I stayed in council until 80. I went in 76 at a by-election. Right. And then I stayed in council till 80, and then the new people here then wanted one of their people to nominate, Kevin Childs, and because we were there were two of us, Kevin got in, but I didn't. And who do you think got 15 votes more than I did? Gordon Braithwaite. So Gordon hadn't been in council for a while, and he decided to come back in that year in 1980, and he just beat me. And then I think he became president for a long time after that. But I did go back into council. People wanted me to nominate again, and I did go back into council in 83, and I was there till 87, when it was time for both Bob and me to retire. Local council and some of our local people who've been living here all their lives, if new people come, they think that they're going to take over, whatever they meant by that. And I guess they thought, well, they'll get into council and they'll have the radio and they'll do what they want to do. And so I think that happens when you get new people in the community, particularly when you get new people such as happened here, where they had all these new ideas. and a new generation altogether. And see, Bellingen, here on the north coast, people had been living the same lives for a long time, and we didn't even have the radio until the end of the 30s. We didn't have TV until halfway through the 60s, and we were quite lacking in a lot of things. And unless you were the sort of people, we thank God for the ABC, unless you were the sort of people who, of course we always had our wonderful education system, even in the country, but they were very set in their ways, and I'm not going to bring politics into it.
Right. I'm curious to know why you weren't set in your ways.
I think it was because of my education, and also during the 60s I was always very interested. After I got married, I wasn't interested in politics or anything very much when I was young. I was just young, like young girls who have a good time, and I was busy with my school teaching. But after I was married, I began to get interested in politics because it was affecting the farmers. And then I started reading books such as the Bulletins and the Time. I always liked reading, and I listened to the radio a lot, even after I was married, because you can listen to the radio, and the ABC always had wonderful programs. And when I read the Time, I learnt all about the women's movement, and when I went back to teach, I found out about the dreadful system they had in the public servant, where if you got married you couldn't be permanent anymore. You could only be you'd be lucky enough if they just gave you a job at all. And so I became very interested in those sort of things. I used to go with my friend, I got into because I was interested in the women's movement. I heard all about the women's electoral lobby. They had a branch at Coffs, and we used to go to Coffs, 3 or 4 of us, to the branch. And then I found out that a friend of mine was in Nambucca, was very interested in too, a person called Pat Richardson, who was still in Nambucca and doing quite a good job with community arts, etc. And we used to go together to the conferences, and so that's why I think that my mind had been broadened.
Right.
By the reading I'd done and listening to the radio and things that were happening at that time. My husband didn't really support me in this because, like many men, it worried him a bit, particularly once when I said I was going to change my name back to my my maiden name. Oh, that was dreadful, so I never ever mentioned that again. But no, he didn't really like me to be, he wasn't very fond of very strong females. He liked you to be a little bit on the submissive side, you know. And it worried, like most men, it worried him a bit. Yes, that you're going out with these women and talking about these things, you know. Now, my husband was known as Hairy Bob.
Hairy Bob?
Because he always had his hair fairly long, not like what you'd call the hippies or the alternates had, but it was the way he did his hair. It was always a little bit longish. It wasn't a real short cut, and so they called him Hairy Bob, and his cousin was called Red Bob because he had red hair. I'll tell you another thing happened to me when I was in council too that I was very proud of. Another young man who'd been very active in the community came to me and he said, "Mary, we were going to a special meeting up at Armadale of the Transport Department." And he came to me and he said, "Mary, when you're up there, see if you can get them to do something about these people who speed along and pass cars in dangerous places." He said, "What you want to ask them is to put a sign up saying that there is a passing lane a couple of kilometres from here or so." And so when I went to the special meeting, I got up and asked them about it, and the RTA decided they'd do it. And they're the signs that you see on the road where they tell people, don't pass here, there's a passing lane in a couple of kilometres where you're about to pass. And so I was very pleased about that, although it was his idea. Some people who could be very much against you in one thing could be very helpful in another. I remember somebody saying to me, "Oh, how do you get on with Peter Sanger?" And I used to say, "Well, it's quite all right." I said, "Sometimes Peter's my enemy, and another time he's right with me. It just depends what comes up in council." Some people don't realise just how many things do come up in council. They're only aware of some of the things that are being, that are very important at the time, but at every council meeting you have lots and lots of things that come up. And I just realised that it didn't matter who might have been against you in one matter, he might help you in another matter to get the numbers for it. So I can't really remember anything wonderful I did. Or, as I say, I only think that a lot of these things happened later, and I always think I lost out on the main thing, about the old school being pulled down and that. That's what I fought for. Yes, I've been living here nearly 60 years now, 59 years, and Bellingen has really changed, because when I came here the roads were very poor. Even the Pacific Highway was still a gravel road, and you were quite like people used to go in a bus to Nambucca, where they had a Saturday night dance, and the local Bright Lights orchestra used to play. And if it rained, sometimes they might even have to help the bus to get out of a bit of a bog or something. So you can imagine, that was not in the 50s. And also Bellingen wasn't very economic at the time either. Everything seemed to be getting run down. There weren't very many people here, because the North Coast, I always thought, was sort of at the end of the line. We were a long way from our capital city, and as I say to people when they ask me about music, I say, well, there were only 3 places on the North Coast where you could be taught music properly and get your exams, and that was at the 3 convents, at Kempsey and Grafton and Lismore. And I was lucky enough to go to Grafton, of course, and do all my music exams there. But Bellingen, you could see that along the North Coast here, everything was we needed more money, more or everything. And people had been coming here ever since I was a child to Sawtell, Yamba and those places for Christmas. They'd be absolutely chock-a-block, and there'd be wonderful places at Christmas, but all those people came from somewhere else, and they'd go away, and then we'd just settle down into the old routine. Then around about the early 70s, new people started to come here, and I thought that was a wonderful thing. And as well, I always remember what one of the sisters at the convent said to me. She said, "Oh, it's a great thing," she said, "because Bellingen is becoming what do you say when people are all intermarrying too much?" She said, "We'll get all this new talents and things coming, and also you can see what has happened with more money coming into the area, and it really has gone ahead, and we got to have these beautiful." They grumble about the roads, but they're wonderful, the roads. I'm a great fan of the what do they call the people, RTA, is it? Yep. Yep. I'm a great fan of theirs. I've seen what they've done around here.
Right.
We now get we get a global carnival, we have a jazz festival, and we have every week we have lots and loads of music, and we've got wonderful people coming here and living here in this area, and we now have classical music concerts, and you've got lots and lots of people who can teach everything. We've got a conservatorium of music, you can see what I love, but we've now got a university. And I think it's marvellous what has happened to us here. Camp Creative was started by Bill Lockley, who came here, one of our new residents, and he lived on the North Bank Road near Bellingen. And because of his expertise and his love of music, first of all he helped us in other various ways, but then he got this great idea of starting Camp Creative, and he formed a committee. I was one of the committee, and then we as you know what Camp Creative is now, well, it was started here in Bellingen at the high school. It's so much better economically for the town too. It brings in all this money, which is what, here on the North Coast, is what we needed. We needed more finance. Since the 70s we've had wonderful people come here to live because they've heard about it. And coming here, that's what I was trying to tell you earlier, coming here earlier for their Christmas holidays, they loved the place, and when they decided to move from south, they wanted to come here onto the north and mid-north coast, and also not just the ordinary folk, but we've had folk come here with lots of talent, celebrities such as George Negus and David Helfgott. Peter Carey was living here for a time, and that's why we can have all these wonderful things happening here, because all these people have come here, and Coffs particularly. You know, they're doing wonderful things at Coffs, at the university, and with their orchestras and choirs and everything, and education. It's wonderful here now, I think. Bellingen in the 70s was like a lot of the North Coast. It was going backwards. Farmhouses were looked derelict, and even in the town nothing new had been started for ages. They weren't having their concerts that they were having when I first came here in 1950 and met Bob, and we were just sort of, felt as if time had stood still. And then all these new people started to come, and amongst the alternates, and then we had they were buying up properties out in the country and going out to live alternate lives. And then we had things such as the Good Food Shop that was started by Peter Geddes, where that was quite a new thing for Bellingen, what were the things we could buy there, and they were very, very diet conscious, environment conscious, which was very good, and talking about organic farming and all of that sort of thing. We had people coming here and giving lectures about all of that sort of thing, and the place started to move again. Planet came here and set up an industry over in North Bellingen, making glass. And I don't know what else they did over there, but and provided a lot of employment, which was a wonderful thing. And our neighbours came here with Planet, Bob and Gillian White, and they had a lot of expertise too. And it was Bob who organised bringing Planet here. He was the convener, I suppose you'd say, and Gillian had a lot of expertise with going to government departments and putting in submissions and things, and so we were able to get a bit of some grants for the neighbourhood centre and for the CYSS.
Right.
Yeah, for the young people, we were trying to get. We're still trying to do it in Bellingen, I know, but I think they're doing pretty well. Although council hasn't given them the youth a place yet, we're still fighting for that. And we were trying to start a young people's association way back in the 70s, but. And even to see how times have changed, even the senior citizens who are in the Senior Citizen Centre, members of the Combined Pensioners and Superannuants, they even moved to send a letter to council and ask them to please let the youth have the old library, because we believe that the youth shouldn't be parked away somewhere or on their own. They should be with close by council and the neighbourhood centre and the senior citizen centre, but we weren't lucky enough. They gave it to the information centre, and that was a silly thing to do, I thought. Right. When Planet came, Brett Eagleton, the Eagletons owned Planet, and Brett Eagleton had been a member of the Red Onions in Melbourne, and so he brought his wonderful trumpet with him, his drummer, Graham Bennett, and then we had wonderful jazz here in Bellingen too, started because of that. My people were quite conservative, particularly my mother, and she always used to worry when I was in the teaching profession that I might become a communist. But I used to say to her, I'm not interested in politics. But then I did become interested, but we didn't join the Labor Party until after Whitlam was sacked. And we were all so incensed by that, all of the people. I did get to favour the Labor Party because of my interest in politics and what had been happening to the farmers, and I thought the Conservatives weren't doing what they said they were going to do for the farmers, etc. So I did become a Labor supporter, but I didn't join the party until Gough Whitlam was sacked, and we all became so incensed that we formed a branch here in Bellingen. My education started in a little one-teacher school at Talawajja Creek, which is a creek that runs into the Urara near Glenray, and there were about 16 to 20 pupils there, and there was a teacher called Mr. Ernie Chapman when I went to school there, and he was there all the time I was there. And he was a very good teacher, and my people on the whole were pretty intelligent people. I had a brother and a nephew that he was very pleased to get a bursary for them, and he thought that I might get a bursary too, but I didn't get the bursary. Although I was a good pupil, I missed out with my maths, he told me. And then of course I'd already done about 12 months music tuition. We had a woman called Daisy Grant, and she had a little red car, and she lived in Coffs, but she came out once a week to Glenray, and they had a lovely big hall there called the School of Arts, and every week she would come out and take us for music. And I used to, we didn't live in the town, we lived on a farm, on a property. I used to ride the horse down and tether it there and go in and have my music, and she thought I was doing very well, and my family were very interested in music, and my mother wanted us to be taught. My two sisters were taught the violin for a while, but Daisy had an accident in her car and didn't come back, so mother wanted one of us to keep on with my music, and as I seemed to be the most promising one in the family, she persuaded my father to send me to St Mary's for my high school education and to learn music. And while I was there, I was the only one in the family who actually went to high school, because it was too hard to go to high school in those days, unless you went to boarding school. St Mary's College was a boarding and day school in Grafton, and it's still there, but it's not called that now. It's become it's different. They don't have a boarding school there. But I went there for boarding school for 5 years, and I had a very good teacher called Sister Raymond, and I went through all my exams right up to grade 1. But they were back the other way in those days, and I did very well, got honours for her, and then I got a scholarship and went to Teachers College at Armidale. That's how I became a teacher. And in the school, as you know, I graduated to the infants department where they needed the music, and I taught in the infants department till I got married. But I've always been very interested in music, and I've kept it up, and I was one of those people that I didn't ever forget it. I could sit down and play any time I wanted to, and I also played by ear. And I've done quite a lot of music, as you know, here in Bellingen, so that's why I left council in 1987. I said there was a lot of music happening in Bellingen then, with the new people coming here, and I said if I don't leave council now and do some music, I'll never be able to do it. I was getting on in life, and so I've done quite a bit. I've done quite a bit for people by accompanying them and singing in the choirs and doing all those sort of things that I've really enjoyed. When I was on council, one of my greatest interests was to save the halls. There was some of the councillors were thinking of getting rid of the old halls because they were costing too much money, and the people were very much up against it. The Kalang people, even the Memorial Hall in town, they were thinking of pulling it down and making a car park. The people at Deervale, and I went round and visited them all, and that was one of the things that I accomplished when I was in council. I really fought to have those halls preserved, and particularly the Memorial Hall. We've got a new committee and all sorts of things, and it's a wonderful hall. It's one of the biggest halls on the North Coast, and we still have that. And another thing I did that I was very proud of when I was in council, I started home care. I'd been speaking to one of my friends, and she told me what trouble she had because she had a disabled husband. He was blind, and she told me about the home care they had in the Nambucca Shire. So I said, oh, well, we'll see what we can do about it. So I contacted one of the Nambucca Shire councillors, and she said she'd come over and get it started for us. And in the meantime, I'd already told them up at Dorrigo I was going to get them home care, and I remember one woman said to me, I'll believe it when I see it. But anyhow, the councillor I asked Mary Fakeney too, who was the president of the CWA, would she help? And so the councillor from Nambucca came over, and we had this a meeting in the CWA hall, and it got it all started, and home care has been a really wonderful thing for this area. You do get a few things done, even you're disappointed about not getting some of the bigger things. You can't get everything you want. Yeah, and I joined the local government women's association. As I say, I went with Pat, and I used to have to persuade them to let me go. The council, because what do you want a local government women's association for? We've got the local government association, but it was a very, very strong association, the local government women's association, wonderful women on it, and I enjoyed going to those, as well as to the women's electoral lobby, because I was the only one who was interested anyhow.
Right.
Yes. We had one other woman councillor, but she wasn't interested in the local government's women's council, although she was a very good councillor in a lot of ways. Pat Oakman was president of the Bellingen Council for quite a while, and she was a wonderful woman and did quite a lot for the community. But there was another woman, Joan Summerhays, who had been a matron in Dorrigo. She was a Dorrigo councillor. But I was the only councillor who was interested in the women's movement, actually, at the time. The thing that I've really got the most joy from in my life, I'd say there would be two things. One, having my family, a very good family I came from, my own family, my father and mother's, and having my family now, and also my music. I think I've loved music more than anything. I still love it.
Right.
Yes, and I'm still doing whatever I can in the community with music, and going to any concerts I can manage. Right. And listening to our lovely ABC classic. When I came to Bellingen, I came here as a teacher, and every year in Bellingen, the Presbyterian Church used to have a Scotch concert. And there was some very good items in it, and they had the Bright Light Orchestra playing for it. And they used to do some items and probably do a bit of accompanying as well. And they asked me to play something, so I played the Chopin Minute Waltz, and after the concert finished, a friend that I'd met here, another girl, she said, would you like to meet Bob Anderson? Or whether he'd asked to meet me, I don't know. But we were introduced, and Bob took me home that night, and that was how I came to meet him, through a concert. I had seen Bob earlier when I was at practices, and he was sitting in a few seats. It must have been a rehearsal, I think. He was sitting in a few seats behind me, and I did feel quite interested that I thought he'd be a nice person to know, well, I don't know what you'd call it, when you sort of feel a bit attracted to somebody.